Toronto's ZoomerRadio and Toronto's Jim Cuddy, the first single from Jim's brand new solo album, All the World Fades Away. It drops June the 14th. The track is called Learn to Live Alone. And this is the Morning Zoom with Sam and Jane. Not sure how much alone time Jim Cuddy is getting these days. He's performing with his band, Blue Rodeo, celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. And then there's the Jim Cuddy Band with a bunch of dates on the calendar. And now Jim's latest solo album and a tour set to begin mid-June. Jim Cuddy and Blue Rodeo have a very special gig tonight at Massey Hall as the house band for a huge concert we've been talking about for months now, celebrating Gordon Lightfoot. Thrilled to welcome Jim Cuddy back to ZoomerRadio. Welcome back.
Hey, thank you very much.
So good to have you here.
Nice
Where to start? Let's start with Learn to Live Alone, since we just played it. Watching the video and watching you sing and the whole story that plays out, I have been thinking a lot about this, how we need to learn to be in ourselves, to like fully come to who we are as human beings, which seems a whole lot easier later in life than when we were youngsters.
Yeah.
Just wondering how that all evolved for you.
Yeah, I think those are very interesting observations. For me, it has a lot to do with, long-term relationships are kind of founded on time apart sometimes, and how you deal with that time apart. When I see a couple that's been around a long time and they're just like, joined at the hip, I think, how do you do it? And my wife and I, obviously, my wife has a lot of time alone because I do a lot of touring, but I don't get a lot of that time. And so when I do get that time, when she goes on a trip without me, I should be good at being alone because I spend a lot of time on the road alone.
Right.
But I'm not. I'm bad. I'm calling her and, how is it in New York? Are you having a good time? And are you too busy to talk? Okay, we can talk later. It's okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Sounds like a healthy marriage to me.
Really. So, and it is funny because the video does depict her showing up at the end,
right?
And she was really reluctant to be in the video.
Oh, yeah, I know. And well, you work with your boys. And what about your wife? I mean, is she involved in your career as well? I mean, I guess she has to by default because she's your partner. But she's got her own thing going on with the acting, right?
She is. She's an actor. She's a writer. She produces. She runs the Chekhov Collective in Canada. She puts on a show every year. So we have entirely different artistic worlds, and it's always funny for each of us. She's very used to my world because she comes to shows or sometimes goes on the road. Very rarely, and her world is very different. And and I really like going to see her world because the expectations of a rock band are, look after us lavishly or we'll start to whine.
We know about the Blue Smarties.
It's just ridiculous. But when you go into the acting world, if you provide actors with free beer, they weep. It's like, oh my God, this is fantastic.
They're so appreciative.
It's just the economic level is so much lower,
Sure.
and it makes rock bands seem like such a bunch of whiners.
Divas, all of them. Yeah.
I have
You
to
just follow
ask
me there, huh?
I have to ask you about how important Toronto is for you, because the video of you walking down the typical Toronto back alleyway, it just reminded me where I lived on the Danforth for 16 years. I'm not exactly sure. Did you shoot it there on the Danforth?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And I just thought, just wondered about your connection to Toronto, because that's such a consummate Toronto image.
That is so good. You are really hot today.
I know, right? And
really hot today.
And the questions are good too.
So I have a funny thing because my parents lived in St. Louis when my mother was pregnant with me. She didn't know anybody. My dad was away, so she came to Toronto to stay with her sister-in-law. So I was born in Toronto, but I didn't live in Toronto. We went back to St. Louis. So I always had this thing growing up about Toronto. We lived in Brantford and Ottawa, and then we lived in Montreal. And I always had this thing about Toronto. Like, Toronto's the greatest. Love the Maple Leafs. Love everything about it. And then at the end of that summer, 1967, my dad said, we're moving to Toronto. I'm like, oh, my God. It's the greatest thing ever. So
Wow.
I have loved Toronto all my life. And I have spent, Marina and I lived in New York for 3 years, but Yeah, but basically, we've lived in Toronto, raised our kids in Toronto. I love everything about Toronto. I love the fact that people hate Toronto. It actually reinforces my love of Toronto. I think you just don't know.
No.
You have no idea. Most people that hate Toronto have never even been to Toronto. Well, it's so busy. Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
think it's too busy. And I just love it. And you know what? Just what you mentioned, that I've had many a younger escapade wandering the alleys of the neighborhoods and just thinking how beautiful this city is and how many hidden treasures there are. So yeah, I love Toronto.
Yeah, we do too. We absolutely do. So Blue Rodeo, 40 years old. How is that possible when you're 40 years old?
I know.
So,
I
mean,
know.
how did you do that?
We were a boys band in our
That's true.
teens.
That's true.
Yeah, it is an amazing thing for us too, because we the newest member of the band's been in 18 years,
Isn't that crazy?
and so we're very fortunate to be still able to go out and perform like we do. We are not without our medical liabilities, and that's just part of being an older band.
Yep.
But everybody seems to be thriving, and obviously making music is an enriching thing, and we're lucky to do it.
I just want to jump in, Janie, for 1 second. Greg Keeler is on your new solo album, which I dig because, I mean, if you know Greg, he's part of Blue Rodeo, big part, half of it actually, in terms of the co-founding. So really great that you brought him on to your latest solo album.
Well, I knew that song, when I wrote that song, I wanted to have a call response in it, and I wanted the response to be slightly comedic. I was like, I've been waiting for years. And like, yeah, we've been waiting for years. That kind of stuff. And I thought, what better ironic partner than Greg?
Yeah.
And he was cheap. He was
Probably owes
He's
you a
never
couple
asked me
favors.
for a dime yet. So maybe I'll get the invoice, but so far nothing.
That's so funny.
Talk to us about Gordon Lightfoot and what he means to you in light of the big celebrating Gordon Lightfoot concert.
Gordon was the guiding light for, musicians that stay in Canada. I mean, Gordon was world famous. He could have gone to Beverly Hills. He could have done anything. And he chose to stay in this little mansion in Rosedale and lead his crazy Gordon Lightfoot life. We got to know Gordon over the years. Like years ago when we met him was at the Stein Valley benefit, which Gordon was a character. So I must have met him 3 times during the day, and each time for him was the first time.
He meets
Absolutely.
a lot of people.
He had no idea. And it was a benefit to save an old growth forest in the Stein Valley.
Wow.
And Gordon was the headliner. David Suzuki had put the concert on. There was all kinds of people, thousands of people there. And Gordon's opening remarks were, the loggers have got to eat too.
Yeah.
And there was a stunned silence to all the people trying to save the old growth forest. And I think that's what sort of cemented my love of Gordon, that he was so unique. And we got to know him, and he was a phone caller. Like he would see you play, and then he'd phone you the next day and ask you about something. Remember, we played Mariposa. Greg and I did a Mariposa, and Gordon was on, I guess, obviously after us. And he called me the next day and said, "Did you have trouble tuning?"
No.
What do you mean? And he said, "I was there 8 hours tuning." I was like, "Oh my God, you really were?" And apparently that, he was in his dressing room tuning his 12-string for 8 hours before his concert. And I said, "No, we didn't have any trouble tuning."
Or did we, Gordon? What did you hear?
No, I don't think he was saying that, no. But there's so many stories like that of Gordon's friendliness, his approachability. He was so interested in all these musicians, and he would go to see their shows, and any show at Massey Hall of a new musician, he'd always go to see. And he was very generous in his praise and very modest in his criticism.
Wow.
But he was critical sometimes.
We had Meredith Moon on the show, and she was saying similar things to you about her father and how his storytelling was really one of the highlights for her. I mean, obviously being his daughter and spending quiet time together, but storytelling. And I feel like Blue Rodeo and Jim Cuddy and all the endeavors you've been involved in are really about storytelling too, right? It's not about just the hit. It is actually about taking us on a journey.
I think that, again, you're hot too today. I think that when we came back to Canada from New York, Greg and I had been in New York for 3 years, and we'd been pursuing this music. When we came back, it was difficult for me to go where Greg went so automatically, just into pure Canadiana. And to listen to those songs that Gordon wrote and gradually, as I started to understand the beauty of them and recognize that it was important to start to name check our own lives, like where we were, the places we played, the people we saw, and not to have this dream of England or the States, that just let that go and just be Canadian. And when we're doing this tribute, because we're learning songs for guests to sing, but there have been no guests for our rehearsals yet, so I've been having to sing all the songs. Wow. And you realize that Gordon's songs are perfectly constructed. They scan perfectly, rhythmically. They're so interesting. There's always a couple of bizarre lines. You know, Greg has got me singing the first couple of lines of Summer Side of Life, and I have to sing His Love Was Ripe. Now, that is so Gordon Lightfoot. Most people would say, that's kind of embarrassing. Say, too bad. That's what you're going to sing. That's what you're going to sing.
Exactly.
You know, Sammy mentioned Gordon Lightfoot's daughter. Before we wrap up with you, want to hear about your kids, and we understand that there was a wedding.
Yes, our Sam got married on the weekend, and he did it in two, I guess weddings are kind of different now. So he did the wedding ceremony on Friday in a private place. And then Sunday was a big bash at the Lula Lounge, which is an amazing place in the West End. And it was all musicians. I mean, he had 3 sets of music by all his musicians. Blue Rodeo played 4 songs, and both my sons have bands, Devin Cuddy band, and then Sam and the Old Tomorrows, Sam Polly and the Old Tomorrows. So it was an enormous music bash, which was so much fun, and there was a lot of joy.
Oh, that sounds like
it. You mind me asking, is that the first marriage for your kids?
First marriage for the kids and the youngest.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it's either going to push the other 2 into never getting married, or perhaps something will happen fast. I don't know, but it was a really glorious affair.
Oh, that sounds
wonderful.
amazing.
It's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
totally agree.
Yeah. Family is what it's all about. Listen, good luck tonight. Have fun being a house band.
I know. It'll be really fun. We're really looking forward to it.
Yes, and the Lightfoot Band too, because you'll be playing off of each other through the evening,
They do the
right?
first set with I think Meredith's singing with them, and then we do the second set.
I love it. And we have big news to share too. Every day next week, we're giving away a pair of tickets to an evening with Jim Cuddy, All the World Fades Away album release party. This is such an incredible prize. Your chance to see Jim Cuddy and his band perform songs from Jim's new solo album. The release party happens June the 4th at Hughes Room Live, and your chance to win your way in, it begins on Monday. Jim Cuddy, congratulations on son Sam's wedding and all of your successes. There are so many things going on with you, solo and Blue Rodeo and the Jim Cuddy Band. And when do you sit and relax? Ever?
Right now.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Well, way you go. You got another interview to do, I'm sure. You were a
Thank you very much.
machine. Thanks so much, Jim.